What's up, fellow music nerds? Matrix here, and you're locked into the Matrix Music Review Podcast, the only place to get your fix for alternative music. And we are back with a big set of reviews this week. We had a ton of new material drop this week. We got 4 albums, a few singles, and then one tour to talk about. Not too many tours talked about this week, but we're going to cover them all anyway. Make sure you head on over to Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok and give us a follow at Matrix Music Review. Keep in touch with us on the daily basis. You can see what I'm listening to, get all the tour announcements on the day that they're released. Head on over to Spotify, Apple Music, wherever it is that you listen to this podcast. Give us a thumbs up, give us a review, 5 stars, whatever it may be. Leave that there for us. That helps us push our content out to even more people. And head on over to Spotify and like our Control-Alt-Save playlist, which is linked in the description of this episode so that you can be up to date on all the music that I've been listening to and that we cover here on the podcast. I think we're up to about 25 hours worth of material so far this year, so it'll be a playlist that can get you through a lot of stuff. As I said, it's a big week this week, so we're going to jump right into our album reviews, with the first one being The Best Part About Being Human from Bearings. Right away, the first thing I have to say about this Bearings album is that it is a fantastic pop-punk record. This is start to finish a great example of why pop-punk isn't dead. It's a great example that the sounds and the vocals and the lyrics and all the things that we have come to know and love in that pop-punk genre are still alive and well with bands like Bearings, Magnolia Park, Arrows in Action, all those different bands that we've heard from this year so far. Bearings really puts it into perspective that this genre is not even close to being dead. You know, we start out the album with Scenery, which I know I've talked about on the podcast before, but then we roll right into a song that is definitely a jam of a track and Don't Want to Forget About It. It's kind of that classic up-tempo-ish breakup song, and they're really, lyric-wise, we're going and talking one last time on the drive home. What would it take to make this go right? And you're just lying to your friends to say that you're fine. It's all those little pieces that we've kind of come to expect in this genre, but it's in such a fun manner that it doesn't feel like this is a real breakup going on here, right? Like, that's one of the things that I feel like pop punk does really well at times. At times you can get these up-tempo-y breakup songs where everybody feels great, and then you can also hit, the depths of despair here and get the self-loathing, self-wallowing in pity of why this happened and how could this happen and how can I get back to that person. So love this track one from Bearings. Another track on there is Go Long, and Go Long's an interesting one to me because I feel like Go Long is kind of a clever take on potentially a long distance failing relationship, and I think this one's really open to interpretation because I interpreted it as this is a long distance relationship that's kind of hitting a snag, basically hitting the end of the road. And this Go Long title, it doesn't really mention going long in the song, so it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but it's kind of like, how long would you go to get this to work? This could just be a song about a failing relationship. It could just be kind of hitting that snag in the road. I don't think there's one correct way to interpret this, and that's a lot of times what artists will say is all of our tracks are open to interpretation. They're open to your own thoughts on what it may be or what it could be. So I love that here. But one of the things that I found on this album is that I actually had a very clear, easy favorite first time through, and it remained that way the next couple of times that I listened to it, and it's actually their song called Ocean Dream. And Ocean Dream is one of those tracks that it kind of captures every part of that pop punk sound, and it also captures what makes pop punk so good, is that there's always this unexpected nature of a song in this subgenre here, right? Like, for me, every time I listen to a pop punk track, I never know if there's going to be a straight down the line song or if it's going to be something that's going to jump out and really surprise me. And so with Ocean Dream, this is one of those tracks where, we're cruising along and we're talking about, how the ocean can feel heavy and it's going to help us to hold steady and all these different things. It checks all those lyricism boxes and things like that. And then at about 1:35 in the song, all of a sudden you get hit with this out of nowhere beautiful saxophone solo. And I can remember listening to this track the first time, and that saxophone solo came on, and I just said out loud, "Are you kidding me? Like, what in the world?" It kind of came out of nowhere. I wasn't really expecting it, but man, does it do. It's such an addition to the song, and it makes the song that much better. Like I said, it's that unexpected little twist that you get. A lot of times we get that more with lyricism, but in terms of musically, throwing in a saxophone, which we almost never hear in this genre, is another thing that just kind of sets Bearings apart from some of the rest that I've heard this year, especially on a track like Ocean Dream. This track is fantastic, and the saxophone only improves upon what that is. I think the last thing, or last song at least, that I wanted to mention here on this Bearings album is How You're a Freak. And the only thing I wanted to mention about this is that this second verse is definitely kind of like a very relatable thing here. They basically say, all we want to do is drink and talk shit together. I don't have any money or any time, but there's always too much on my mind. And life is crazy sometimes, but you know what? Sometimes that crazy really is okay. And I feel like that's just such a relatable verse for everybody. All the time, a lot of the times maybe we just want to drink and talk shit with each other or with friends, but there's no money to do it, there's no time to do it, or there's, just too much on your mind that you can't do it. And that's why life is so crazy. But sometimes that crazy is okay, and that crazy makes you feel like everything is okay. So love that little relatable lyric from Bearings. And I think that's really why this album stood out so much for me, was that it was so relatable, and it really just kind of hits you right in the nostalgia feels too. Like, this is an album that I could have listened to back in, 2008 and not kind of blinked an eye at what was going on here. This Bearings album is definitely one that came at the right time for me. It's kind of a perfect album to end summer with. I feel like as we get into fall and then winter, some of my listening tastes get to more of a seasonal change in terms of like mood. As we get into the winter months and it gets colder and it's darker later and all those things, I might not want the happier upbeat tracks like I'm getting on this Bearings album. So it's a great way to end summer. Great album overall. I love the direction Bearings is going here with this. I'm excited. I know that they're on tour in the fall and they're headed in my direction. I'm going to see if I can't get out and catch them in a show, because after this album, I think they're a band that I definitely need to check out live. This album for me definitely sits at about an 8.4 out of 10. There's not much wrong with it. I think, 10 tracks again. We just talked about this last week with 10 tracks being the sweet spot. I think they hit it perfect. Bearings, their new album, The Best Part About Being Human. If you hadn't heard it yet, go check it out. Next album is The Moment You Find Your Flame from Atreyu. With this Atreyu album, less really is more. This was only 8 tracks, and it was kind of broken up into almost kind of 2 EPs. You had 4 tracks and then 4 more. I feel like some of these have been released in the past. I definitely have heard some of these already, but when you put them all together, they really work. And opening track has a fantastic breakdown towards the end of the song. And after you get done with that first track, you roll right into a track called Immortal. And Immortal is a massive hit for me. I think that song is potentially going to be huge for Atreyu. It's got the heaviness behind it, but it's also very simple. It's not like we have to really think too much about the lyrics on this one, but we can just kind of, I don't want to say headbang along with it, but that's kind of exactly what we're doing here. Like, this album is full of those types of tracks that really just kind of get the emotions flowing a little bit, but they're still simplistic in the fact that there aren't a ton of lyrics that really make you think, but that works for me and for Atreyu on this album. A lot of times you guys will hear me complain and say that, I want lyrics to make me think a little bit more, but not so much on this Atreyu album. I think it works really well that it's in a more simplistic style here, and it's more easy to understand. And I think part of that is because of how long Atreyu has been doing this and how long they've been doing it at such a high level. I think the maturity from Atreyu really shines through on this album and really shows why they're such a stalwart. They've really mastered their craft and mastered what they do well. I talked about that last week with Caskets and their new record. You know, when a band finds what they do really well and they've mastered that, when they continue to put out material that just kind of hits that spot, everybody's going to be paying attention, everybody's going to love it, and that's exactly what we had here. And this Atreyu album was interesting because, you know, I feel like a lot of times when we're listening to music, especially in this genre, when we hear electric guitars, there's not much variation or uniqueness to it. I mean, yeah, everybody has their own unique style, but for me, that was something that I really picked up on right away with Atreyu, was that there was something different about the electric guitar on this record for me, and I really can't place what it is. I can't really figure out what it is exactly that made me say that there's something unique about it, but there's definitely a uniqueness to the electric guitar from Atreyu on this album that kind of made it stand out and kind of made it better, at least to me. That's the way it stood out for me. But overall, I think this was a great record. I think the heaviness on a song like Capital F really kind of hammered home the emotion of this entire record. And Capital F is a song that basically is talking about, does the world know how effed we really are? And that it's basically too late to change that. I mean, I think that's something that everybody may relate to, or may at least, you know, sympathize with, that, you know, the world's kind of going downhill a little bit in different areas and in different aspects. And is there anything we can do to change it at this point? Probably not. It's probably too late. So, like I said, overall, really strong here from Atreyu. Another really strong, I'm going to call it a metalcore entry. I mean, I don't really know how to define Atreyu here, because this album definitely has metalcore bits in it, has metal bits in it. But for our purposes, we're calling it metalcore, and in terms of ratings, it's an 8 out of 10. Like I said, this week has been nuts with album releases, and they have all been spectacular. So 8 out of 10 for Atreyu. If you haven't heard it yet, go check out The Moment You Find Your Flame. Next album is Prepare for Despair from Point North. Third album from Point North, and easily for me the biggest album of the week and potentially of the past couple of weeks. This album from Point North, it was one that I was looking forward to. It was one that was kind of high on the anticipation radar for me, but I don't think I expected it to have the effect it did on me. This Point North album is definitely in the same realm of The Death of Peace of Mind from Bad Omens last year in terms of what it has the potential to do for Point North as a band and what it has the potential to do for this scene. When you get 11 tracks that are as clean and as energetic and as almost, I'll say, perfect as we get from Point North on this album, it really sets up kind of a moment for this band. And this band is ready for that moment, and it's ready to explode, and it's ready to take that next step. Kind of like Bad Omens did last year, where they catapult into this superstardom status. And everything about Prepare for Despair here really does set them up for that. Psycho is a smash. And, you know, I really don't even need to talk about that. I know I've talked about that on a previous podcast, so I'm not going to jump back into that one. There's lyricism all throughout this album, right? Like, there's different pieces that really make you say, okay, their lyricism is something that sets them apart. Their lyricism is something that makes that a strong point for them. Whether you get a line like, save us from the cancer we've become in a song like Prepare for Despair. Whether you get a line like, I rubbed the bottle from the sand and the genie said, I don't deserve shit, from their song Your Wish Is My Command. You know, or even, you know, he'll flip-flop like a TikTok trend in a song like Recover. Like, they're all just little different things that kind of show you that they are so creative and that they are really thinking about what they're writing down, even if, you know, in a song like Your Wish Is My Command, we're talking about rubbing a bottle from the sand and the genie saying, well, I'm here, but you don't deserve shit. So it's kind of a little play on that. Like, his your wish is not his command because he's not going to answer that because you don't deserve it. So all those different little pieces there really help to show their lyricism, show their creativity, and show the talent that Point North has as lyricists. You know, in terms of standouts, there were two major ones for me besides Psycho. I think Below the Belt is a real standout for me. It is got the lyricism that I talked about where you say, can you find that help from someone else and don't pass that trauma to me? Those are they're different things for me that I just really stood out, different lines that stood out for me. You know, you get a line in there that says, beat me like a punching bag. You know, we never get a line in this track that says anything about below the belt. You get a lot of beat me like a punching bag, things like that really kind of convey that point, but you never get a below the belt line to hit in there. You get heavy screams all throughout this track. You get just this perfect blend of screaming and lyricism and sonic sounds that just all go together so perfectly. And the same thing happens on a song like Social Suicide. That's another one that really stood out for me. And Social Suicide might be my favorite off of this album. And it definitely has my favorite line in this entire album where it says, let the voices in my head keep me company. I'd rather be depressed than pretend that I have friends. And, you know, that's a heavy line. Like, that's a heavy line to think about. What they're basically saying is all these voices in my head and all this depression that I have is better than saying to myself that I have friends or having fake friends. That's a hard thing to hear, and that's a hard thing to think about. So another one that just this is an album that really makes you think. You know, I talked about Atreyu not really needing you to think a whole lot. Well, Point North, not so much. You're going to be thinking on just a little bit on this, and it's going to kind of catch you at times saying and thinking about things in your life and thinking about things that you may be going through. And, you know, finishing off here on this Point North album, this is one of those times where I say it's a perfect blend. And perfect blends don't come around very often because it's very difficult to blend sonically, lyrically, vocally, all those different things that make a song great. It's very hard to replicate that for 8, 10, 12 tracks. The fact that I'm thinking that Point North did this for at least 9 of the 11 tracks or 10 of the 11 tracks, I mean, that's hard to beat. That is a very hard score to beat. That's a very high praise for a band like Point North, where this is their third album. And I think around the third album is usually when bands start to hit their stride. So I love that this is what we got from Point North here. I think this is an album that clearly, with this perfect blend, has planted itself firmly into discussion for Album of the Year. And, you know, ratings-wise, it's going to be the highest one I've rated. I know we just started the ratings not that long ago, but this one is a 9 out of 10 easily for me. You know, it's not all the way up at, 9.7 or anything like that, but a 9 out of 10 for Point North here. This is one of my favorite albums I've heard this year so far. I have been in love with it since it came out. I've been playing it nonstop. Had so much fun with this album, so much fun doing this review. So if you guys have not heard it yet, go check out the new album from Point North, Prepare for Despair. And the last album is actually an EP, or should I say 2 EPs, and those are the new ones from Magnolia Park, Moon Eater and Soul Eater. So when we got these 2 EPs, I think it was Tristan from Magnolia Park that basically said, Moon Eater is for the mosh pits and Soul Eater is for the pop punk. So we're going to start with the mosh pit Moon Eater section. And we had heard 3 of the 5 of these already. I had reviewed the other 3 tracks on the podcast. You can go check out those reviews. Those were all in single reviews. But Unholy Heart is one that we hadn't heard yet. And this is an absolute anthem of a track. I love the Honey Revenge feature here. I love Devin's vocals on this. And there's a line in this one that says, you're my parasite and you can leech off of me for only the night. And I love that line. Calling someone a parasite usually is a kind of a derogatory way of saying, like, all you do is leech off of me, which is exactly what he says here. But the fact that they're allowing it just for the night is kind of different and unique. But the other thing about this track, and I can't figure it out, and if you guys know who it is, please let me know. When Devin starts to sing her line that says, "There will be blood," there's actually some screams behind it production-wise, and I can't tell if it's Josh, is it Freddie, is it Vince? Like, I can't tell who it is that's doing those screams behind. I've never really heard that before. So if you guys know who it is, let me know. But that was such a interesting production choice, and it actually works really well because you can't pick up on it unless you listen really closely. And even if you listen and you hear that, it works so well for them. I love that. And then moving on to Soul Eater. This one was interesting as well. Blood Love is definitely a funky change up from what we're used to hearing from Magnolia Park. Even more so because Vincent was the one doing the vocals here. And it was impressive. I loved it. I love the production on this one. It's a little bit different, and it's something that definitely could be a crowd pleaser. I can see that being a crowd pleaser in the future. The song LOVE, I love that little twist that it says we went from LOVE to HATE, and my ex is going to know it when she hears this song, because he's basically saying that this track is all about love, but until you listen to the lyrics, then you realize, oh, no, they're not good anymore, and all of this happened. She cheated on him in his car, and why did she do that, and how could it happen? But it went from LOVE to HATE real quick. I love that little twist. And then the energetic end of this EP comes with Wishful Thinking, which they had been promoting for a while, and I love it. You know, we get those energetic ends that always sets us up for looking into the future. And overall, this one's a 4.5 out of 5 for the EPs. I'm grouping them together. You know, I'm not going to rank them individually, especially with us having heard 3 of the 5 on the Moon Eater side. It's not worth it to kind of break them apart. We'll put them together, 4.5. Magnolia Park is one of those bands that I talked about it last week, saying about how much output they've put out this year, and they're really putting me in a dilemma this year. It's hard because looking forward to like end of the year lists and things like that, one of the rules I have for myself is that a band cannot have more than one track on an end of the year list, right? And with Magnolia Park, it's almost unfair to kind of handcuff them with that when they've released 2 EPs, a deluxe album, multiple singles, all these different things, and they've just had this steady output of great music this year. So we might have to reevaluate that as we get a little bit closer. But in the meantime, if you haven't checked it out yet, go check out the Moon Eater and Soul Eater EPs, new from Magnolia Park. Wraps it up for our albums this week, but we're going to jump into our singles with Fool's Gold, False Idols from Mike and the Nerve. So this track is due out on Friday the 25th. I got an early listen to this one, and man, this is an energetic track. I love the sound of it. And this one, when this comes out, I want you guys to really pay attention to the guitar on this. The guitar riffs and rips is the way I'm going to refer to it, are just insane on this track. I loved it. It was so, so good. And we're going to do our word alert of the week as well on this track. We got a sycophant mention in this. Unbelievable. Great track here from Mike and the Nerve. Check it out when it comes out on Friday. Fool's Gold, False Idols. Next track is Just a Mess from Trxvis. This is going to be our discovery of the week, and this is a killer pop punk sound from Trxvis. My first introduction to him as an artist. Really looking forward to hearing more from him. Go check out this new one, Just a Mess from Trxvis. Next track is We're Not in Love Anymore from Knox and Charlotte Sands. This is a hell of a collaboration from 2 of what I'm considering are future stars in this scene. I think they both have a chance to be stalwarts in this scene going forward. Love this collaboration from them. So if you haven't heard it yet, go check out We're Not in Love from Knox and Charlotte Sands. Next track is Don't Pull Up from Mouth Culture. This has kind of established Mouth Culture as being fully on my radar. You guys know how much I love their track Sunny Smile, and this just kind of furthers that momentum that they had from those past couple singles. Really, really looking forward to hearing more from them. I love this kind of direction they're taking. I love their sound. So if you haven't heard it yet, go check out Don't Pull Up from Mouth Culture. Next track is Pale Iris from ERRA. This is definitely a heavier song than what you guys are used to hearing me review, but the chorus and the vocals on the chorus really drew me in. And the heavier side of stuff was really awesome to listen to as well. You know, I'm getting more and more comfortable with listening to some of this heavier stuff and putting out reviews of it. Really enjoyed this from ERRA here. So if you haven't heard it yet, go check out Pale Iris from ERRA. Next track is Stronger from Fight the Fade. You know, the chorus talks about being a stranger to the world I live in, kind of giving us that Alien from the Funeral Portrait vibe, and you know, it's something everybody can relate to, feeling like a stranger in your own world that you live in. Love this track from them. Go check out Stranger from Fight the Fade. And the last track that we're going to talk about is F You to Your Face from The Romance. Now, this track was released a while back, but it came onto my radar. I had finished listening to, I think it was that Point North album, and just kind of let Spotify do its thing and play some tracks that were similar to it. This track came up and I fell in love with it immediately. It was one of those tracks that really caught my attention. Has a great sound, a little bit of an edge to it. Obviously, by the title, you can figure that out. But really looking forward to hearing more from this artist. I'm really excited. I love this sound. So go check out F You to Your Face from The Romance. That wraps it up for our music reviews this week. But we got one tour to mention real quick before we end our podcast, and that tour is a headline tour from We Came as Romans. Gonna get support on this tour from Amur, Body Snatcher, and Archetypes Collide. If they're in your area, go check them out. We Came as Romans on their headlining tour. And that wraps it up for us here this week. I hope everybody enjoyed this week. It was absolutely insane to have no album below, I think, what was it, like an 8? I think was the lowest that we had. And that's insane. That's probably never going to happen again, although I think this week's shaping up to be a pretty big release week as well. And not just for alternative, but also for like the rest of the music industry. I think we're getting new albums from Holding Absence. We're getting new albums from The Word Alive. We're getting something from, in the rest of music, I think this is like Turnpike Troubadours and Country. It might even be Zach Bryan this week. I think we're getting Ariana Grande's got stuff. Selena Gomez has a new track. Drake might be dropping an album. So you might as well just take off on Friday and just figure out what kind of music you're going to listen to for that day, because there's way too much being released on the 25th. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Follow us at Matrix Music Review to stay up to date on all of our day-to-day proceedings. And that's the best place to get in touch with me as well. If you want to, recommend anything or recommend any music for me, I respond mainly on Instagram for that. Head on over to Spotify and like our playlist, Control-Alt-Save. It'll be linked in the description of this episode. And as I always do, make sure that you are sharing this podcast with your friends, whether that be on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, wherever you get our podcast. Share it with your friends. Leave us a review. Leave us a like, 5-star, subscribe, whatever you need to do. Continue to get our podcast out there so that everybody can continue to learn about all the new alternative music that is out there in the world. And for my Spotify listeners, we let a band play us out. This week, it is a very simple choice for me. We are going to let Bearings play us out with their track Ocean Dream, and I will see you guys next week.